My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue Mahan's teachings on the vision of God. How does one experience the vision of God? And as I mentioned in the last three satsangs, I really like this picture here, which tells us about how one can cognize the divinity or God or the supreme consciousness. And it's about fixing our eyes, our vision on what, not what we see, but what is unseen. And it says very nicely that for what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So we are unable to cognize this unseen or this divinity with our material eyes, but we can cognize it with our mental eyes, our mind. And how do we essentially focus our mind? How do we recalibrate, refine, retune our mind to be able to experience this? If at all we experience this divinity, what will it be? How will it be? What is it that we experience? So here it is that, great Mahans and saints pursued this. And when we do introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, and do the deep tapas, tapas is the deep, intensive introspection and this meditation, we see that, the qualities of the divinity starts emanating. And we start seeing that, as the material world becomes more and more quieter, our bandwidth, our mental and an intellectual bandwidth increases. And what the ordinary mind could not cognize, now a more quieter mind is able to cognize, become aware, and slowly we see that the qualities of the divinity or qualities of that self starts permeating in us. Sometimes that experience is difficult to express in words. There's no words to describe it, yet we experience it. But the intellect should be put to task to describe this experience. And this is where the introspection, contemplation, reflection, and this whole notion of, using our buddhi, the sankhya, to be able to understand and to be able to put a word to what we are experiencing, at least an approximation, a good approximation of what we are experiencing. The reason why is that the human mind find it hard or grapple with abstraction. The human mind can only understand, at least in the early stage, of something more tangible. So the intangibles, we need to start giving an approximation with words and vocabulary that is tangible, that we say, this is what it is. Because the human mind, when it recognizes the words to describe it, the vocabulary to describe it, it is able to, hold on to it. It is able to, when the mind holds on to it, that thought becomes deepened in the mind and it becomes part of the memory. When the mind cannot hold on to it or does not understand it, it forgets it, right? It becomes fleeting. But when what was intangible, we try to approximate as best as possible with the words to tangibilize it, so that, this is what it means, as best as possible, right? That approximation of that experience gives you a word to describe it. And you're able to then, store it in our memory, analyze it, retrieve it, and the next time when it occurs, you remember it. So the mind then starts describing that experiences of the self, glimpses of it in multiple manifestations, in its infinite potential and possibilities. And slowly, slowly, the vocabulary in your mind is now filled with the description of that experience of that self, right? And what is really interesting is that for an ordinary human mind, the mind is filled up with many, many limited thoughts, thoughts that makes the mind shrunken, thoughts that makes the mind turbulent, thoughts that makes the mind volatile, thoughts that makes the mind fear of things, anger, envy, all those things fill the human mind, an ordinary human mind. But when the human mind, and this is why the human mind has all its frailties and gets caught up in the day-to-day sukha-dukkhas and succumbs to the vagaries of life. And after a while, they say, I'm so tired, I can't do it. So the Mahans and great saints teach us a way to quieten it down and get glimpses of that divine self. Sometimes there's no words to describe it, but when we introspect deeply, we can get a pretty good approximation of the vocabularies that describe it. The approximations are good enough. And slowly, slowly, your mind is filled with this description of that self. It becomes real. It's no more abstraction. It's no more that is, we are unable to grasp it, right? And we have a pretty good approximation of the understanding of that experience of that self. And slowly, slowly, that experience of the self becomes a thought, and it starts filling up the mind, and it starts crowding out all the thoughts that makes the mind shrunken, angry, hatred, jealousy. Slowly crowds it out. Or would an ordinary human being be caught up by all this frailty of this human mind? Now the mind becomes inoculated by these thoughts and the experiences of that self. Ultimately, you see that all that limitedness, the thoughts that makes the mind shrunken and limitedness will be crowded out and dissipate. The mind is filled with thoughts and experiences of a pretty good estimation of that self. And there comes a point that you see that the quietude, the clarity gives you the sublimity and ultimately lead you to the divinity itself. So this beautiful journey takes place through this, journey of introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation. Over the many years of practicing Mahan's meditation, more than 40 over years, reading his books in the early phase, I did not understand many things. I read scriptures, I did not understand it. And over time, as the experience, as that unarvu, the vibration became stronger, as I started introspecting deeper, as I started reading, reflecting, slowly, slowly, the words in the scriptures, the words of the Guru, the words from I God starts jumping out, starts magnifying. I say, is this what that description of the self that I'm getting? I'm getting quietude, a sense of silence, a sense of... So I started jotting it down, right? This is I may not get the exact description of the self. I got a pretty good approximation of that self. And slowly, slowly, you see that as the vocabulary of the self starts increasing, the approximation becomes more and more closer to the description. And as I was reflecting, how would I describe that self? As I looked at it very carefully, it is in the word self itself. And this is what, I've been jotting it down, and slowly, slowly, some powerful words, some inspirational words, and awesomeness words, all these words that describe the divinity in its full entirety starts emerging. Our vocabulary base expands, right? And something very interesting happens that he said, I've got this experience and I don't know what this experience is. And he said, but I know I'm experiencing, there must be this experience to describe this. So I started looking in the dictionary. Yeah, I'm experiencing this exuberance. I'm experiencing this. And I start looking at it. And I start finding the words that jumps out from the dictionary, and the same word starts jumping out from the scriptures and the words of the guru. I say, there's a correlation and triangulation that takes place that is describing, that self that I'm experiencing. From that process emerged that 4 doors that opens to that self. And I'm still covering the first door, the last few classes. The first door is actually about the supreme experience. And I spoke about the 10 experiences over the 40 over years, the sense of silence and serenity, the focus, the shraddha. And I saw that in the scriptures. They said anyone who takes this path will have that intensity. Mahan says, Utru, Utru, Noka, Noka. And I won't go into detail because you can refer this back to the previous YouTube clips. But what we saw was that life becomes ultimately very simple. All the complexity of life, complexity of the relationship with us and others, with us and everything around us, starts becoming more and more simpler. And you see that the cause and effect, the sukha dukkha slowly dissipates, the forces of that dissipates. The sense of transcendentality happens, and that's the 10th. So there's 10 qualities I spoke about, the last 2 satsangs. And I like this thing where, you realize that you've been searching for something, but you found yourself. But when you search for the self, you find that qualities of the divinity, that divinity itself. So we see that, I spoke about these 10 qualities. And as we go deeper, even Mahan also mentioned that still seeking, the seeker finds himself God. The journey now is no more a life that is just, ordinary, and I spoke about this too, that often an ordinary human mind will ask, what's the purpose of life? And when you take this journey, you realize that the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose, right? And you see that life itself becomes sacred. It's a kind of a holy, divine journey of experiencing, elevating, enriching our experiences, understanding, and ultimately, outliving all of those experiences and, attaining that wisdom of those experiences. We see that the scholar in us starts emerging, probing, asking questions, wanting to know, not just to know, but the knowing process and that knower. And slowly, you see that, you attain the superhuman qualities. You can operate at a frequency level that is much more higher and much more subtler than an ordinary human being. So you see that, this is what we start seeing, that we start transcendental, we become transcendental towards that humanly frailties and weaknesses and the limitedness. And you see that, this is what that self is. The self is not touched by this physical body or the limitation of the physical body. The mind becomes so powerful and say, that's the glimpses of that self that I'm experiencing. I want to now go to the next 10 qualities that I picked up over this last 40 over years of this journey from this first door, which is the supreme experiences that we get, the glimpses of the experience. You see that these glimpses of the experience also have been documented by great saints and sages when they go quietly up the mountain to reflect, to introspect, and they get the revelations of that self. That's what it means. So I want to take you through the next 10 experiences of that self one would have. I am sure some of you all will have other experiences. And this experience I've documented is my experience. I'm sure some of it may be very relevant to your experiences. But I'm sure you chart your own experiences and hope you document it and speak about it, sometime, So I want to look at, I started reflecting back, and I came across, this beautiful quote by Rumi. I read a lot of great Mahans and great saints, and, and here, through this journey over the 40 over years, I was searching too, right? So, and this beautiful quote exactly hit the nail on the head. It says, I looked for God. I went to a temple. I didn't find him there. I went to a church and I didn't find him there too. I went to a mosque and I didn't find him there too. Then finally I looked in my heart and there he was. And I want to add another line to this quote. The moment I found the divinity in me, I found God, the divinity in the churches, in the temples, in the mosques, in the streets, and in the hearts of every human beings and every sentient beings and in nature. So this is the experience that one gets. And how is this experience possible? And I'm going to go through the next 10 qualities that adds on to this Rumi's comment. So here he says that he looked in the heart and there that God was. But upon discovering that God, I discovered God everywhere, right? Even in the hearts of the people that give you a lot of difficulties. So what is the qualities that Rumi was talking about? What is the qualities that I was able to experience over the last few years? So I'm going to put Rumi's comments there, but I'm going to take you through my journey. Interestingly, that self is the only true thing. Everything starts and ends with that self. And the human mind, which is forgotten, now starts reuniting back to that self. This is what yoga means, to be in union with. This is what Kadavul means, to be embarking within. And you become a seeker of truth, the seeker of the Maypurul, the seeker of the divinity which is unchanging. So you start seeing that the mind starts searching for this, right? Relentlessly. It sees it in the scriptures, it sees it in your guru's work, guru's speech, it sees it in the flower, in other people and everything around you. So the mind starts seeking this truth in everything. As I said, I added the 2 additional lines in Rumi's comment, right? The moment you touch that self, you start searching for that self everywhere, the divinity everywhere. Because the moment the mind is inoculated by the self, it starts experiencing that self in every manifestation. So the seeker in us starts coming out. We don't become a dormant person that, dogmatically listens to things. We start looking for that divinity everywhere. So you see that the seeking quality, it's no more accepting something, but we are all seekers of that truth, right? The second thing is that when we do that, something very interesting, when we start searching like an explorer, when we start searching like an explorer for the truth, you start developing navigation, or you start acquiring the navigation tools to get there. So the mind recalibrates back to searching that truth. And ultimately, the mind is able to transform itself. See, I'm using the word self. The mind transforms itself as a spiritual compass, the compass that guides us to the destination, the ultimate destination. So you see that the spiritual compass starts emerging. What is a spiritual compass? Looking at all the scriptures, the religious teachings, and pulling out the essence. Looking at all the self-realization discussions and methods and techniques that are taught by Mahans, extract that. But using logic, reasoning, and scientific approach, unifying that to guide you to that self. Reinforce that self. Become aware of that self and see the self everywhere. That's what the spiritual compass guides. You see, I see this in everything that I do. Even if my mind is away from it, this GPS or this navigation tool takes me there, takes me back to that, original perspective, experience, and awareness. So you see that spiritual compass is that guide. So the seeker is that explorer now has a tool to be able to navigate towards this experience and understand this experience. Something very interesting happens. You probably would have heard this thing called the sage. A sage is actually, you start experiencing a profound experience of wisdom. Because of search for the truth and because you've got the navigation tool that continuously guide you, and as you are making that journey, every moment becomes a experience, a learning experience. That's why Mahan said, Arivin, Arival, Arivin, Telivu. So that experiential learning that the spiritual compass takes you through gives you the profound experience of the wisdom, understanding, awareness. And that's what a sage is. A sage is somebody that essentially have that profound glimpses of that experience of understanding, awareness. So the sage in you starts emerging, the Mahan in you starts emerging. You get glimpses of the awareness of the great prophets, the great saints, people like Rumi. You connect very easily. You connect to the teachings. Before, the teachings would have just been there. Yes, somebody said this, but today it reverberates, vibrates, and resonates in you. And you see that Mahan or the sage in you starts emerging. Because of the searching for the truth and having the spiritual compass, one experiences this. Something very interesting happens. Our senses, which is very gross, very crude, slowly starts softening. Our heart that is very hard, very self-centered, very selfish, starts melting. So when the mind that is hard, gross, starts become more and more refined, we see that the way we see things, the way we cognize things become more softer and more gentle. Our thoughts become more softer, as you'll see later on. What do I mean by softness in the sense of empathy and so on, right? Our words become more softer, but profound. Our action becomes more softer and graceful. You'll see later on when I speak about it. We see that a sense of subtlety, no more the grossness, the subtlety that I spoke about in the previous satsang. You can see that the sense of softness and gentleness appears in us. Before, maybe we would have got angry. We are very, I don't know what you say. It's just agitated, but now there's a sense of calmness, sublimity, a sense of softness, gentleness that takes place, right? And in that softness, you see that magnificence, that greatness, that splendor, whenever you see that nature is such that when we have that softness and gentleness, our mind becomes more calmer and more quieter. Our mind becomes more refined. And you see that we start getting the splendor qualities, amazing qualities, the great, magnificent qualities, and you can feel that bliss that we call the tejas, a sense of wow, right? Not coming from outside, coming from within, right? Many a times that you'll be sitting down quietly and meditating or thinking about something and you get that wow feeling, that aura. You can feel your own aura and your own tejas. That's the self. That's describing its splendor, giving you that splendor experience. I've seen that in Mahan. Once you're sitting down and meditating, and his aura was so strong that as we were getting up for meditation, he said, "Don't get up, observe this." And we could see that glow in him, right? And that splendor. And all of us carry that glow. The only thing is that, the glow is much more smaller than our material glow, and that subsumes everything. So when that material vibration becomes quieter, our divine vibration becomes more magnificent, more greater, and we start, we can experience it. So the splendor of our own self transcends our body, and the body experiences this. And this is glimpses of that self. And something very interesting happens, right? You get this nice tejas, but you have that spectacular feeling, that amazing feeling that it transcends your biology. You feel that seamlessly integrated. You feel that energizing. You feel that the understanding and awareness, all questions and queries just drop off. Anything you think, any query that comes to the door of your mind, understanding becomes very clear. It just dissolves. So you have that spectacular experience of life, right? And then you start seeing that every challenges that you have, the scars transforms into stars. I've been using this many a times, but this only happens if one experiences that self, right? The self is the only one that can transform the scars into stars. Many people come to me, talk to, our center, come to a center and say, look, we have so many challenges and all those things, because the challenges are material and the mind is focusing on the material. The day the mind decouples from the material world, at least for a moment, a short moment, revel in its, spirit, and when it gets that splendor, that spiritual compass to navigate you through, and you see that the amazing feeling, the tejas, the glow subsumes all the scars and transforms it into stars. It becomes a foundation for our enlightenment process. So we see that there are no challenges in our life that we cannot resolve. Maybe we need a little bit more time. We see that amazing spirit in us, that supreme consciousness in us, that experience helps us overcome these challenges. We feel something very interesting. We feel superb. Actually, all these things I'm using, splendor, spectacular. Some days you just feel superb. You feel you're on top of the world. You're on top of everything, right? Nothing escapes you, and you have full control of your life. It's like Sri Krishna having full control of your chariot. The divinity is riding your chariot for you. As a matter of fact, you feel that the divinity is riding your chariot no matter how the terrain is, how slippery, how rocky. Say, no problem. I'm just going to hold on tightly, and I'm going to ride this ride and have that amazing, profound experience of the wisdom of that riding those different terrains. So no matter what the terrain is, no matter what the life's circumstances are, you see that you're still on top of everything. You see, and that's what the self reveals to us. There's no problem that we cannot subsume, integrate, transform it from scars to star. Superb qualities that the mind gets. And this leads to the next quality. When one is able to have that feeling of you've got full control of your life, full control of your mind, nothing external impacts you. It's that self, the mind that is inoculated by the self, has its own DNA, its own dynamism, that nothing, its own force, that nothing can, take it from its direction it's heading. And you see that because of that, you become an architect of your own life, not from outside, from within. And you see that you get this unconditional joy or happiness that Swamiji speaks about, the Summa Irukum Sugam. Because the self doesn't need anything to be happy. A material human mind will need, oh, I want a bigger car, I want more money, I want this and that, and all those things to be happy. But when the mind is inoculated with the self, with the subject, it doesn't need any objects to be happy. It doesn't need any events in life to be happy. It just is happy. That unconditional joy and happiness. That's why Swamiji says that Sandosham. Sandosham is actually about Santam, that is able to, that Santam means the calmness, the coolness of the mind, that Dosam is actually keeps out all that negativity, you become transcendental to it. So you get this unconditional joy and happiness. You'll see that Swamiji in English puts glad, that Summa Irukum Sugam. You wake up in the morning and you breathe the first air and you can feel the whole universe reverberate in you. When you breathe out, the whole universe you are releasing from yourself. So we see that supreme experience of the self emanates in the form of that unconditional joy and happiness and love. And the last one is that, which is really important. Now that you have full experience of the self, you become a sustainer, right? You become self-sufficient. You become, you don't have to depend on anything to sustain yourself. You have this mind, hey, I have divinity with me, I have God with me. What else do I need? Right? If I have God with me, I don't need to stand in front of God and beg him for anything. And you will experience that God and me, God is called to my DNA. I have everything to be self-sufficient and sustaining, not only myself, my family, the community, and nature itself. And you become, this is the seamless integration with everything around us. So we see that this 30 words that describe that self, 1/4 of the self, which is the supreme experience. Next class, I'll speak about the other doors, right? And we see that this is what Rumi was trying to describe. This is what Mahan was trying to describe. Searching and searching, I discovered God in his entirety. All this were the experience, the splendor, the wisdom, the spectacular feeling, on top of the world. On top of the world means transcendental too, that, the forces of the world or the material universe, and having that unconditional joy and happiness and the sustaining qualities. That is why you see that when we first start meditating, we feel very nice. But many people don't pick up these values and embed it or, inoculate the mind. And what happens if they don't do that? They drop off from that, sustaining their meditational sadhanas. So when you are able to experience this, when you're able to document it, put an approximate word to describe this, and you see that maybe one word may not be enough to describe the self, that you need many words to ultimately describe this self in its complete. So you've only got 30. I've documented 30 words that at least the first door described to me what that self is. So we see that slowly, the glimpses of this self slowly squeeze out, the search for, the dogmatic belief systems, the search for something material, which is elusive, the worry of, poverty, death, disease, all that dissipates. When all this anger, hatred, jealousy, envy, all these things disappear, you see that the real you starts emerging. The nice part of you starts emerging. The glorious part of us starts emerging. And slowly, you see that life becomes an awesome journey, right? Of that self revealing itself in everything that we do. And this is what Mahan's teachings of the vision of God nothing will descend from the heaven, come from the heaven. Nothing will, it all emerges from us. And if we are sharp enough, if we are intensive enough in our introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, you see that the glimpses of that infinite divinity start showing up in our mind and slowly transforming our mind to become that divinity. Santosh.